In 2004, Valve released Half-Life 2, a highly anticipated first-person shooter that changed the gaming landscape. Half-Life 2 was one of the first mainstream games to modernize interacting with in-game physics and in-game cinematics. At the time of its release in 2004, many AAA first-person shooters followed a familiar formula that started to become stale. Half-Life 2, on the other hand, changed the formula by delivering an experience directly to the player without removing them from the game. As a result to its massive success, Half-Life 2 inspired various other developers and projects to follow in its footsteps. Today I'll be showcasing 4 examples of games influenced by Half-Life 2. Let's start with one of the earliest examples of this influence, with a 2007 sleeper hit, TimeShift. TimeShift is a first-person shooter created by Saber Interactive, released in October of 2007. The game is set in a dystopian, 1984-inspired world that is suffering from an ongoing war. The main plot revolves around this guy named Dr. Crone, who decides to use what is called the Alpha Suit in order to go back in time and rewrite history to how he sees fit. You play as an unknown scientist who is equipped with a Beta Suit, a suit where you're given the ability to manipulate time. You then embark on a journey to stop Dr. Crone. Like the name implies, TimeShift's main mechanic is the ability to manipulate time. The Beta Suit gives the player the ability to slow down time, pause time, rewind time. This core mechanic is used during combat as well as solving puzzles throughout the experience. It mostly shines whenever you're in an engagement. For an example, instead of ducking behind cover, waiting for the AI to pop out to take him out, you can pause time, move in front of them, lay down fire, then unpause time to watch them explode as a result. This also applies to scenarios where the player is faced with odds stacked against them, such as avoiding gunfire and even reversing time to avoid rockets coming towards you. TimeShift is influenced by Half-Life, mostly in its time mechanics. Think of the first time when you picked up the gravity gun in Half-Life 2. The game hands it to you and shows you what he can do, but it's up to the player and how they can go about using it. You can play mostly through the game without even using the gravity gun, but most people decide to use the gravity gun simply because how intuitive it was to use. Picking up random objects on the map and using it as a weapon opens up the perspective on what the player can use within the game engine, but also promotes experimentation. TimeShift borrows this mentality with its time mechanics. It's a tool that the player learns over time and really relies on experimentations to utilize it to its full advantage. Just like the gravity gun in Half-Life 2, you can play the game without even utilizing the time shift mechanics for the most part, but then it's nearly not as interesting. The game feels kind of flat without it. The time mechanic made it stand out among the crowd of FPS games at the time who were more focused on chasing popular trends than set himself apart. The setting is also influenced by Half-Life 2, especially in the beginning segments where you're in the war-torn city, which feels a lot like City 17. There's a really limited amount of first-person shooters that utilize time as a mechanic, and I think TimeShift really set the bar on how to go about doing it. Metro 2033 is a first-person survival horror shooter created by 4A Games, released in 2010. Metro takes place in the city of Moscow, Russia, 20 years after a global nuclear holocaust in the year 2013. This nuclear war required the remaining survivors to start life inside the expansive Metro subway tunnels. You play as Artyom, a man who is tasked to endure the Metro tunnels in order to stop a mysterious creature known as the Dark Ones. Throughout the experience, Artyom encounters various enemies, allies, and tons of creatures and monsters as a result of the nuclear fallout. The game is based on the novel Metro 2033, written by Dmitry Golovsky. 4A Games' main focus with this project was immersion and putting the player in the shoes of Artyom. Throughout the experience, the world around you reflects with this focus. The villages and towns inside the metro are makeshift and made out of anything they could find in the subway tunnel, as well as people in these communities have daily routines, will chat and gossip with each other, and just the overall sense of dread and a hint of optimism can be felt just exploring these parts of the game. The game does an exceptional job selling you the life inside the metro tunnels. For the most part of the game, you'll be exploring the tunnels, which are dark, full of mystery and danger around every corner. You can see the struggles and survival wherever you go and the sacrifices people made for a better tomorrow. As a result, 4A Games did an exceptional job at highlighting these elements. Its Half-Life influence is on how the game carries its narrative and set pieces. With in-game cinematics, Artyom is mute during gameplay and only speaks during monologues between loading screens. One really cool thing that Metro 2033 does is that during loading screens, Artyom will have his monologue. But the best thing about this approach is that it gives you context of what's going on and what's going to happen next. So if let's say you decide to stop playing the game for a while and you come back to it, the monologue will play over again on the loading screen. And considering for loading screens you're basically staring at a blank screen, it gives the player some perspective and more insight on Artyom's mind. I've always loved this attention to detail and I wish more games did this. Metro also takes it up notch with resource management and immersion. For an example, the game is very dark, so naturally you're given a flashlight. The light has a limited battery, which requires you to recharge it every now and then. This adds tension to the gameplay as you could be in combat and then you can have your flashlight flashlight die on you, putting you in the position of not only recharging the flashlight while trying to survive at the same time. See, certain segments in Metro 2033, our teams are required to have a gas mask on in order to breathe. Every 3 or so minutes, the filters will need to be replaced. Now, since the filters have to be replaced, they're very few and far between in the environment, so you have to be very resourceful on how you use your gas mask filters, as if you run out of gas mask filters, our team will choke to death, and it's actually really eerie listening to this. I would have to say that Metro 2033 relies more on Half-Life 2's story and narrative set-piece focus, rather than the actual gameplay. That's one of the best things about 2033 in my opinion. It's just an immersive, overall phenomenal experience that borrows a lot for what made Half-Life 2 exceptional. Dishonored is a first-person action-adventure game created by Arcane Studios, released in 2012. The main plot revolves around the city of Dunwall, a steampunk, old London style of world. The player plays as Corvo, the bodyguard to the late Empress of Eos. She is killed under Corvo's watch, which in the assassination is framed on him. After escaping prison, Corvo then sets out on a mission to seek revenge on those who framed him. Dishonored is a unique case, as its main claim to fame isn't any particular game mechanic, rather how you play the game. See, many games require you to play in a certain playstyle. For example, Call of Duty games push you to shoot first, ask questions later. RTS games require you to think before reacting, while Dishonored achieves to have no real playstyle, rather leaving it to the player to make that call. You can play the game without killing a single person, opting for non-lethal takedowns and using stealth. It's much slower paced, however it's more rewarding as a result. You can also go headfirst, face off against every guard that comes in your way if you wanted to. What makes this approach unique, however, is the world will react to you depending on your playstyle. If you're less lethal, you can spend more time listening to the conversations, the lore around Dunwall, and seeing the world in a different angle. Versus, if you treat the game like Doom, the game will still let you proceed and the narrative will still carry on, however, the game will become more challenging as a result. Dunwall is already infested with rats, so the more run and gun you do, the more likely you'll come across rats, and they can easily take you out if you're not careful. So you might be asking yourself, what does Half-Life 2 have a connection with Dishonored? Well, let's start with the physics. Dishonored gives the player the ability to pick up and move objects around the map. This includes NPCs, oil tanks, crates, whatever. This also aids in player choice. If you decide to take out a guard, for example, having the ability to pick up the guard's body and hiding it can save you from being detected. This also includes interacting with the environment around you. Another aspect is Dunwall and City 17. They're both very similar in some aspects. The lead art director of Dishonored, Viktor Antov, was a conceptual artist on both Half-Life 2 and Half-Life 2 Lost Coast. Dishonored also prides itself on having various entrances and exits within the map, meaning there's never just one way to get to your objective, there's multiple ways in fact. A lot of the times in Dishonored, you'll find exits and entrances or different ways to get around the map simply by exploration, and this is one of the best aspects of this game. Arcane really nailed this aspect because it never felt that exploration was forced on you. You're almost encouraged to kind of go at your own whim and figure things and just think things before you actually act. One of the best aspects of Dishonored is telekinesis powers. For example, Corvo can use his teleport ability to go to higher grounds, go on the rooftops, go between buildings, etc., or even evade potential gunfire. One of my favorite uses of this case is teleporting behind someone's back and then stabbing them as a result. He also has other abilities like a Wind of Gust, which can push players back, and even casting rats from the ground. Although Dishonored might not be the one-to-one influential example when you're playing the game compared to Half-Life 2, it still wears its Half-Life 2 influence all over it. If you haven't played Dishonored already, definitely give this one a try. Bioshock Infinite is a third entry in the Bioshock franchise, released by Irrational Games in 2013. Set in the fictional floating city of Columbia, the premise has the player playing as Booker DeWitt, a Pinkerton agent who set out to capture and return a girl named Elizabeth to fulfill a debt he owes. Infinite is a game that's very story-rich in a very introspective way. The game plays with the option of choices throughout the experience, and even at times when the player probably didn't think about it. The game starts to unravel its depth, philosophical, and political issues within the city of Columbia. It's a game that tells two stories, one talking to Booker directly in the player and the world surrounding it. Nothing in Bioshock Infinite is black and white, and there's always a hidden meaning behind everything. Half-Life influence revolves around Elizabeth. When Booker first meets Elizabeth, she's hesitant and hard to get a read on. This mysterious aspect of Elizabeth is carried on throughout the experience and eventually ties in the later parts of the game. This relationship is very similar to Gordon Freeman and Alex, both acting as an AI companions to the main protagonist and interacting with them in their own ways. Booker and Elizabeth conversate back and forth, where Gordon communicates non-verbally to Alex throughout the game, mostly reflecting on what he does in the game world. During Infinite's development, Irrational Games was asked about influences, and they actually referenced towards Half-Life 2, in particular Alex, highlighting they want to carry similar experience with Elizabeth. They also decide to have Elizabeth assist Booker in various ways. One way of Elizabeth helping Booker is when you're low on ammo, for example. Elizabeth will go around the map and find ammo for you, and when she does, the game will give you a prompt allowing you to receive the ammo. Things like this add to the bond the player has with Elizabeth and Booker, but also adds purpose outside of painting the narrative. And what I mean by this is that Elizabeth isn't just seen as like Ashley is in Resident Evil 4, for example. She makes herself useful in the environment and will assist you in various ways, despite just being a side character. Infinite also benefits from having a really unique world, as it's floating in the sky, which also allowed Irrational to get creative on how the player traverses between parts of land. Irrational Games opted to use a monorail system in order to navigate throughout the map. Booker has a winch that's attached to his hand, which he can hook onto the railway and move around the level freely. This aids both in exploration as well as combat. A similar system to plasmids from the original Bioshock makes a comeback in the forms of what's called vigors. These are very similar, but have their interesting quirks that set them apart. One of the vigors can turn an enemy AI onto your side, whereas another, when thrown, causes a massive firebomb. While we're on the topic of combat, Bioshock Infinite's combat was a departure to the previous games in that it offered more of an experience inspired by modern AAA shooters at the time. The original Bioshock 1 and 2's combat felt fine, but a little jarring when comparing it to other games. By all means, it's not bad, and if anything, it's serviceable. However, Infinite did correct a lot of these issues that people had with Bioshock 1 and 2's combat. Now, it also was a controversial change because some people thought that Bioshock Infinite was more generic feeling, as the controls felt more like a Call of Duty game than it did System Shock or Bioshock for that matter. Anyways, to this day, Infinite stands out as one of the best games of 2013 and considered one of the best games of the 7th gen era. Its thought-provoking story and immersion is second to none. Its in-your-face political and social issues might be jarring to some, but Irrational Games still executed it well and leaves a lasting impression on the player, which not many games can do. Hopefully this video inspires you to try or revisit some of these games. They're all well worth your time. Thank you for watching. If you like this style of content, please consider a like or even subscription. It really means a lot to me. Thank you again, guys, and until next time, peace.